My name is Danielle Farrell, and this is me, in 1993, the year I was born. This year wasn't just important for my parents, but it was also a course-altering year for the history of computers as well, because in 1993 was also the year that Intel released its first Pentium microprocessor. And though there are many great inventions that came out for computers in 1993, I chose this one because the invention of the Pentium microprocessor marked a pivotal point in the architecture of central processing units, which paved the way for computers to become increasingly more affordable, efficient, and easier to produce. Now, before I go into the specifics on the Pentium processor, it's important to understand exactly what a microprocessor is. A microprocessor, otherwise known as a central processing unit, is where tasks of the computer are controlled and operated. So in other words, it's sort of like the brain of a computer. And before I go more into that analogy, there are a few microprocessors that came before the Pentium that it's important to know about. The first microprocessor ever invented came out in 1971. It was by Intel, and it was called the 4004. It wasn't very powerful, and it only had the ability to add and subtract. But it did pave the way for the next processor to come out, which was the Intel 8080. It was the first CPU that ever was installed in home computers, and it came out in 1974. The last design of any CPU to make a difference in the computer market before the Pentium came out was the Intel 8088, which came out in 1979. The design of this model was the archetype for the rest of the models that Intel has put out and still put out to this day. Now, for the specifics about the Pentium processor. The understanding of the hardwiring of the Pentium processor is a little tricky to understand. So in order to explain it better, I'm going to go back to the analogy of the brain that I was using just a moment ago. The first part that made the Pentium processor very special was the dual integer pipelines that it used. Dual integer pipelines are data processing elements that are connected in a series, so the output of one is the input of another. It's sort of like an assembly line, or to put it in terms of brain, it's kind of like a synapses, which are the structures that passes signals from cell to cell. So it'll pass data from one part of the brain over to the next part of the brain. Another thing that made the Pentium processor important was the faster floating point units. A floating point unit is the part of the computer designed to carry out operations on floating point numbers. Examples of some functions this carries out are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square roots, and things like that. In other words, it performs math functions. So the floating point unit would be in the math part of the brain, which is the left side. The next thing that made the Pentium processor important was the wider data bus. Now this part of the brain is known as the corpus callosum, which probably a lot of you don't know. But what the corpus callosum is a network of fibers in between the right and left part of the brain that lets signals go back and forth and lets the two interact. This is just like the data bus, because the larger that the corpus callosum is, the easier it is for the different systems to communicate. The same way in a computer, where the bigger the data bus is, the better the communication and the faster the communication between the different parts of it. And the last part that made the Pentium processor important was the improved CPU caches. In other words, caches simply just means memory. So in this part of the brain, the memory is mainly located in the middle. In the CPU, the part that stores the data reduces the average amount of time it takes to access memory. So the improved one in the Pentium made it a lot faster than the previous CPUs that had come out. Now the most important part of the Pentium processor that made it such a pivotal point in computer history was the superscalar microarchitecture of it. Now, I know that's another big word, but all that means is that it was able to perform more than one function at once. So just think of that in terms of the brain in our body. Think of how efficient we would be as people if we could only perform one function at a time. So if we could only blink, or breathe, or lift an arm, just one thing at a time, when normally we're used to doing all of these things simultaneously. If we could only do one thing at a time, we wouldn't be very efficient or very quick at anything. That's why the Pentium processor made things a lot faster and escalated things in the computer world very quickly. So the burning question is, what exactly has this little chip done for our future? Well, already I can tell you that since the first computer, the ENIAC, it has made computers a lot more portable and efficient. My cell phone is over 1 million times cheaper, 1,000 times more powerful, and 100,000 times smaller than the first computer that was ever made. What fit in 1,800 square feet now can fit in my pocket. And what fits in my pocket will fit in one single blood cell by the time I hit my midlife crisis, which is approximately in 20 years. It's already done so many amazing things. It's made its technology so much more efficient, affordable, portable, that I can only imagine what it means for our future. When technology gets this small, and the faster and more powerful it gets, it can mean a lot of different things for our future in regards to war, in regards to how we use it, in regards to all of the capabilities that it's possible of. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you.